It's been a bit of a strange year, to say the least. In March, Scotland was plunged into lockdown, and most of us were only allowed to leave the house once a day. This meant a lot more indoor time than many of us were used to, so we had to find new ways of connecting with and appreciating our green spaces, especially those ones close to home. Some of us worked away in the garden. Some of us decided to feed the birds. And others explored new paths and trails. Like many, I was made furlough, so I had plenty of time on my hands, and to make sure I didn't go mad from being cooped up inside all the time with nothing to do, I made it my mission to track down the local otter. Despite living in the Clyde area for 3 years, I'd only caught glimpses of an otter a handful of times. They're notoriously shy and are also crepuscular, meaning they tend to be most active at dawn or dusk. They're a pretty adaptable animal and can live in both salty and fresh water. They've even been recently sighted in some of our biggest cities, although sadly I've never been quite so lucky. I knew I had a challenge on my hand, but channeling my inner Bear Grylls, I thought I was up to the task. I borrowed a camera trap from work, one that I could leave out in any location for days at a time that would continuously record footage when anything moved in front of it. I researched the characteristics of otter poo, I bought myself a couple of tins of fish, and I felt I was good to go. After some short walks around my local patch, I managed to find a few old otter poos, officially called spraints, and planted the camera trap with a little bit of bait. I was confident I would get my first sighting within the week. Never have I been more wrong. It turns out there's a lot of adventurous cats around where I live, and they really like it when you leave fish out on a random rock. I quickly decided to ditch the tin fish and just planted the camera trap wherever I found a spraint, but I still wasn't having any luck. Despite finding these spraints, they were all quite old and by themselves, suggesting that the otters didn't use that spot regularly. It makes sense. Otter territories are pretty huge considering their size, often up to 20 kilometres in length, so actually it was no surprise that I was struggling. Otter spraints are really distinctive from other animal poos because they're often full of bits of bone or shell from the crabs, fish and clams that they've been eating. They also supposedly have hints of lavender smell about them, but this definitely wasn't the first smell I was getting. After weeks of wandering and nothing but cats and rats on the camera trap, my otter optimism was starting to run a little bit thin. Which just goes to show, sometimes the only way to find something is to stop looking. One random day, over a month after I'd started looking for the otter, when I'd kind of given up hope, I found the perfect spot. A patch of rock, ironically about 100 metres from my flat, was covered in otter poo. Old poo, fresh poo, large poo, medium poo, you name a type of otter poo, it was there. I set the camera trap, left it for a few days, and finally had success. Peering out of the dark came the cutest face and bushiest whiskers I have ever seen. To my surprise though, it soon turned out that there wasn't just one otter. We actually had a mother and her pup. I continue to leave the camera trap out at this same spot, checking it every few days and just watching the comings and goings of this adorable pair. Otter mothers give birth to their young in a type of den known as a holt, where the young will stay for about 10 weeks. Even after they venture outside though, they tend to stick around with mum for quite a long time, sometimes up to a year, before fully venturing into independence. The spraints serve another purpose than just getting rid of waste. They also act as territory markers. The scent from a spraint communicates to other otters in the area that that territory is taken and any newcomers should move on. As lovely as it was watching their antics on the camera trap, I was desperate to see them in real life, and thankfully my good luck spell hadn't run out. One evening while I was sat on a rock wistfully hoping for a small head to pop up out of the sea, that's exactly what happened. It was just one of the otters, most likely mum, and she was actually much less shy than I had expected, almost seeming quite curious and trying to check me out. This happened a couple more times and I felt I was starting to work out a few of her habits, when and where she might be active. And then I had another surprise. This wasn't just a family of two, oh no. This was a family of 3. Going out for a walk in the evenings to look for this little family became a bit of a ritual for me during the later half of lockdown. Sometimes I wouldn't see them at all, sometimes it would just be a brief glimpse, but then on a couple of occasions that were really special, I got to watch them for hours, diving and feeding and cleaning each other and just interacting as a little family does. They had no predators, they had plenty to eat, and they seemed perfectly content in this new quiet world that lockdown had brought on. We're really lucky in Scotland as we actually have 80% of the whole UK otter population living around our coastlines and up our rivers. They were almost driven to extinction in the 1950s and 60s due to damaging pesticides and fertilisers flowing from fields and into our rivers. But thankfully, over the last few decades, they seem to have made a recovery and numbers appear to be growing. While we may have solved one issue, we're getting very close to replacing it with another. This little otter family added so much value to my lockdown experience, giving me something to work towards, keeping me positive, but also keeping me connected with the natural world. It got me thinking about what I could do for them to return the favour. As lockdown eased and life began to get back to some kind of normality, I noticed a worrying increase in the amount of litter and rubbish dropped in the same spots where I'd watched the otters fish and play. But it was more than just the usual rubbish that we've all sadly become accustomed to. We had a new culprit: single-use masks. How easy it would be for either mum or one of the pups to accidentally eat or get tangled in our mess. Lockdown gave wildlife like these otters a much needed respite from all the pressures that we as humans put on them, and actually it's something that we should really be learning from. All I ask in this video, on behalf of my new otter pals, don't leave your rubbish at your arse. Put it in the bin, or even better, recycle it, or even better, try and avoid using single-use items, and really have a careful think about the amount of waste that you add to the planet. Lockdown was challenging in so many ways, but we have a chance to emerge from it with a new appreciation for nature. If we do that and act on it, then other wildlife and otter families like this might end up being a common sight around all our Scottish rivers and coastlines. It's not unimaginable.